What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. He's co-host of the Emmy Award-winning Netflix docu-series with Zac Efron, Mr. Darin Olien.
While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
Welcome to the show, Darin.
Hey, man. It's good to be here, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about I read in your bio that you've been doing, this kind of work and into this aspect of health for over 20 years. So what kind of pulled you in that direction?
I mean, it was really playing college football that was the final catalyst. I got hurt. I tore some ligaments in my sacral plexus, and just the normal physical therapies and everything else at that time just wasn't getting me back on the field, right? And it was that frustrating, a very strange injury too, right? Because it's like that plexus is full of, ligaments, fascia. It's just it's a web of just, really stability in a lot of that lower spine, ilium, all of the hips, all of that stuff. So I tore that, and so it created a lot of instability throughout my back. And then so the light bulb went off. I'm not now able to continue to play football, and I got to get out of here. I got to find a major that I didn't think at the time. I never was thinking that I could make a major into what I cared about. And I was already, because I was an athlete, I was already getting into and becoming aware of, weight training and eating better and everything else. And so I changed majors and studied kind of a very kind of weirdly ahead of its time, or just different. It was a small school in St. Paul, Minnesota called St. Thomas. And so it was we studied physiology, advanced physiology, exercise physiology, kinesiology, uh, nutrition, all of these things. So it wet my whistle to a lot of things. And then it was really, I got to get the hell out of Minnesota, in areas that were a little more progressive and kind of where I wanted to go. And I'm thinking, let's go down the exercise phys route and see if I can find something. And I really didn't think I want to go back to school. So I just let's get out in the world. And so I shadowed with a guy, exercise physiologist, Dale Greenwald, in Boulder, Colorado. And so we learned a lot of stuff early days in the 90s of prolotherapy and movement patterns. So it was really quite great because I could apply my stuff in the real world. And so I got kind of interested in the rehab space, but then I started playing in the nutrition world, kind of on the side. And I had a retired MD and DO that used to, I don't know, we just we had a mutual pharmacist friend, and they started kind of Xeroxing because the internet really wasn't something we were using yet, and so he would drop me off pages and pages of nutritional data from the Colorado University Medical Library, and it was the first exposure of just this data that was already existing about how powerful nutrition was. And he kept saying, this is the new world. Like it's like this other world is broken. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm doing this over here. And anyway, long story short, that got me really. So on the side, I kept formulating, I kept looking at botanicals, I kept doing some nutritional counseling in the side. Then I actually got fascinated with the coming together of the mind and soul. How does that relate to health and nutrition
Right.
and that interaction? And so I actually got a master's in psychology, uh, and then just my father passing away uh, in 2003, I said, okay, stop just messing around. Let's put your energy into this nutrition thing, because I really saw gaps in what was going on. And I started traveling because as a kind of a small town kid in Minnesota, you knew farmers, you knew people, all my cousins in South Dakota, and like that was my family. So when I was looking at nutrition, it was kind of it wasn't a exotic idea of like I need to go to a foreign country. It was really like I got to go meet the farmers. Like how are they collecting? How are they using this stuff? How do we preserve the compounds and constituents? Because I was so frustrated. That was kind of another light bulb. I was looking at, enough information on products on the market, and I was just so kind of demystified with and frustrated with like, well, okay, they're marketing all this stuff, but they're not proving it's in there. In fact, it's neutered. It doesn't have so the very fabric of the plants do have these very important, you know, uh, compounds and constituents and abilities to help us. And so that all of that to say, I need to go to the places of origin and learn and see how these things are. And that started this kind of superfood hunting thing, which was a term given to me by a writer out of Business Week, and so it just kind of stuck. But it was that innocence of just kind of wanting to know where things are. I got hired by this company, Beachbody, that now goes by Body, and I formulated a bunch of products for them, kind of under that
Ecology
same.
product, right?
Yeah, so Shakeology, and it was really just given that full. They didn't even have a nutrition team at the time, so they said, "Just can you do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm already kind of doing it, and so I can do this for you." And it was great at the time because they hired me to create this product, but they gave me no limitations essentially. I mean, other than you make it good, make it effective based on, we want this end product of a botanically based high level meal replacement. Obviously with, you know, broad strokes of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, fibers, but I quickly went into what do people need in this day and age, and we're missing. Clearly, we were already missing nutrients and food, and we were missing some of these pillars of I think some of the greatest categories of nutritional food is the fungal kingdom and the adaptogenic kingdom and all of these different, stress modulators, immune modulators. And so I started with the question, right? And that question then started formulating itself, and that path of continuously going around the world was just like, well, this is how it's supposed to be done. I didn't have a playbook of finding another formulator. I didn't even
Right.
care. Like I was like, this is how I believe it should be done, and I just happened to be supported by a company to do it. So that world exposed me to a lot of, 30 plus countries around the world, and I think the maturation of that came by way of uh obviously loving nutrition and helping to serve people in that way, as well as the travel itself, getting me exposed to environmentally and indigenously things that I would have never have understood if I hadn't been there myself. So, water, power, food, shelter, waste became kind of these growing awarenesses
Right.
and concerns at the time, which, just segueing into that, intro of me, those awarenesses took my aperture of knowledge and exposure and just opened that up. And basically, on a piece of paper, I put down an idea of a show. Uh, and years later, the happenstance of Zac hearing some of my adventures and hearing what I was up to on Rich Roll's podcast years and years ago, sparked our first initial connection through health and wellness, and Zac reaching out to me. And so the show became just a kind of a side of like just our natural friendship developing, and he just happened to use his strength to walk it into Netflix and stuff. So anyway, that kind of buttons up the whole story. But now I continue to build platforms to health. I continue to build new shows that are highlighting great people doing great things, environment as it relates to us, which is,
Right.
the fatal convenience side of things, where it's like our modern world has a bunch of things that we haven't taken care of, and we're harming ourselves. And so this whole world of yes, we got to eat right, we got to move, we got to exercise, we got to drink water, we got to go to sleep, we got to take care of ourselves. But if at the other side we don't know of these dangers, we don't know of the negative forces that are in everyday products, um uh then that was my other thing. And that was kind of another full circle of my father that suffered from chemical sensitivity in the 90s while I was in school, was that first education and that popping awareness of like, holy shit, there's a bunch of products out there, fragrances and paints and clothing and uh, everything around us that has some negative effects. And I saw it firsthand. And so I feel like, and it continue, I feel like, listen, at the end of the day, I feel completely, utterly just in service to learning, and every kind of success has 25 failures attached to it. And then with those, how do I transmute and move to the next? And so it's been setting my course for the remainder of what I want to continue to work on in my life. So anyway, that's my very long opening monologue.
No, that's good. Thank you for that. So it sounds like you're coming from a place of genuine intellectual curiosity. It's not like you sat down 20 plus years ago and said, I want to have a best or a really popular Emmy award winning show with a
No.
Hollywood A-lister. I mean, you were genuinely interested in it before it was cool.
Well, I had the opportunity of some of that stuff when I was superfood hunting. And every time, I was in and out of production meetings because people found it so fascinating what I was doing. And like, I understand, but it's fucking hard work, right? It's like you're like getting out in the middle of nowhere to meet someone, a farmer, and sit down with them for 30 minutes. The ending pictures are great, but there's certain danger. People have gotten hurt on these excursions of mine, unfortunately. It's like it's not necessarily sexy, but um So as I was doing that, I just got, I know what it takes to do this, and like the show and needing a celebrity, like these Hollywood production companies go, okay, like, who are we gonna get? Who are we gonna get to be with you? And how are you gonna? And I just wasn't interested in it. I was like,
Right.
I'm good. If we need to do that, I'm kind of good. I don't need to do that. So this was kind of wild how I still was like, I think there's something that can be shared. I'm a big perspective, which is why I wrote it down. And because this TV thing has always kind of been there, but I was kind of like, I'm talking 4 different production companies that could center around, create pitch deck, all this stuff, and eventually I'd be like, meh. Um, so it was interesting when Zac had reached out for other reasons, and we had developed, a connection and a friendship there, and then just happenstance, he had kind of a skeleton show that was nothing about this, but that wasn't interesting, and he didn't want to do it, but he had the structure there. So yeah, it was serendipitous. It was miraculous. To even get anything on television, people think they have no idea. Like it's a miraculous thing, because there's 100 different ways that Down to Earth almost didn't happen either, right?
Right.
So it's that whole thing of a bit of Huck Finn, a bit of Forrest Gump. It's a bit of like, and I think, a very scientific, quantum scientific thing. Like I'm pulled by this thing. I'm gonna do it one way or another. But I wasn't looking at, I need some A-list celebrity. But you also understand there's a game, right? And as
Right.
I'm developing these more shows now, uh, not a game meaning that it's wrong. It's
Right.
just there's a certain level of things that come together that help each other. So Zac coming together, knowing, not much about this world, that originally is okay, cool. I'm going to bring Zac into this world. And of course he cared about it, loved about it. He's a sweet human that I wouldn't have just said yes to a celebrity wanting to do it.
Right.
Like that wasn't originally, I was not even, like I said, I wasn't even remotely into it. But anyway, that's enough about that. But I think the takeaway is it's hard work to create anything in life.
Sure.
And it's also easy at the same time. It's weird that way. It's like if you continue to put out that which you want and do some work and do the hard work, you never know
Right.
what can show up along the way. And my life, I never set out to be a superfood hunter. I never set out to formulate, a successful meal replacement doing $5 billion over the last 10 plus years. And I never set out to do a TV show. There's a through line always:
Mhm.
help, serve, uh, eliminate some of the possibilities of people suffering so that their bodies can thrive. And then from the down to earth perspective, yeah, we talked a little bit about health and water and blue zones and things like that, but we also showed solutions, it showed innovation, showed great people doing great things. So the through line for me is always kind of the same, and then the mediums
Right.
shift around.
And so you have 2 books, SuperLife and then Fatal Conveniences. So Fatal Conveniences is on my list to read along with a million other titles. So don't be offended I haven't read it yet. It's just a
It's
time
okay.
issue. But if I understand the title correctly, it's okay, we've created all these things that are incredibly convenient, but that convenience comes at a cost, and that cost is disrupted biochemistry and physiology.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the rub, right? And unbeknownst to us, right? We were all born into it. I mean, this train started some of them, some nasty chemicals in the, during World War II, Vietnam War, we were playing with some nasty chemicals. 60s, 70s, 80s, like we are ramping up the chemicalizing of the world, and so we're all born into it, everybody. And so we don't really expect to go down a grocery aisle and pick a deodorant or a dental floss, or even processed food with pesticides, herbicides, um, microplastics. We don't expect our deodorant uh, to have fragrances harming our endocrine disrupt our endocrine system. We don't expect that dental floss that has that slippery stuff on. That's a pre and perfluoral alkalized substances. There's a fluorine gas slammed with carbon and creating a very dangerous compound called PFOAs, PFOSs, and that's layered on your dental floss. You're putting in that in your mouth. Like, no one told us that. It's not on the back of the label. Like, so all of my fatal conveniences virtually are not on labels. Many, they're invisible. So from fragrances to plastic in our, all of our clothing have plastic. All of our clothing have taken thousands of harsh chemicals to make. So I go through each chapter from our food system to electromagnetic fields, which is a really big one, um, to household cleaning products, to our bathroom and personal care and beauty, bedding, sheets, carpets. Like, I'm exposing this whole bloody thing. And all to do what? Not to bum people out, so that we have agency for change, for difference, to lessen exposure, so that we're not beholden to carcinogenicity of PFAS, of these endocrine disruptors. PFAS is connected to multiple cancers. It's connected to endocrine disruption. It's connected to high cholesterol. It's connected to diabetes. And guess what? And I'm not making this up. 99% of the human population globally has PFAS in their blood today. They knew that. Some scientists knew it in the 70s. A scientist I directly talked to knew it in 1997. Dr. Chris Hansen, right? So she had a New Yorker article come out. I reached out to her, had an unbelievable conversation. So these things are, and when I say everyone, human population, we have every animal, we have fish, we have bioaccumulation. And this isn't something to be flippantly saying, oh, that's a bummer. This is a bioaccumulator. This is called a forever chemical. This is not a heavy metal that we've learned to chelate out of our bodies. We don't know how to get it out of our bodies. And that is a really big problem. We don't know how to get it out of the bloody environment. So my whole, we have to lower our exposure to these things. Where does that show up? It shows up in our clothing. It shows up in our clothing that's wrinkle resistant, stain resistant, along with our couches, our mattresses, fire retardants, Scotchgard, waterproofing, baby freaking bibs, man.
Yeah.
Like this stuff, leather products, airline stewardesses. Like, we tested. A very good friend of mine, Jeff Garner, did a documentary which I helped him, and I was in part of it. Let's Be Naked is the title, and it's going to film festivals. We went into the freaking labs. We cut fabric. We tested that fluorine, did fluorine precipitation test for PFAS. We saw it, like this stuff. So that's just one. It's one class of chemical, but they're estimating we have over 15,000 in our general population. But I get into several chemicals that you can absolutely avoid, parabens, phthalates, PCBs, like dioxins. Like, we just pick apart this modern world, I do, so that the last third of the book is recommendations. How do we get out of this? Right? How do we clean our water? Half of the population on the planet is being exposed to the environmental exposure of PFAS in the environment. So now 50% of that population is being exposed from PFAS just from our water. So how do we do, what do we do? Filter. We know that we can do a really good job with reverse osmosis and distillation, right? So, but that's also a vacant water. Okay, so we also have to add electrolytes, but the easy thing to do is unrefined, clean pinch of electrolytes, salt, right?
Yeah.
I love US based Utah Redmond salt. I've talked to them, I vetted them. I'm going down there probably next month. Like, so these kinds of things, I have solutions. So this is not just doom and gloom. This is so that we can live a life without being the victim of something we had no choice over, right? It's not anyone's fault, but if you have metabolic conditions, you may have been exposed to heavy metals, you may have been exposed to glyphosate and PFAS, and you keep reapplying your makeup with parabens and things. So your whole endocrine system, which is the the commander of your chemistry, it's being hit from a lot of directions. So we have to minimize those exposures so that we can let our body operate effectively again.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I tell people, for example, you mentioned glyphosate. Like, I've never tested someone, at least provoked. So I have them do a sauna session, or I'll give them liposomal glutathione before we take their urine sample, so it's an accurate baseline. And even people who've been detoxifying for 15, 20 years, their levels are still elevated because there's, a generally 3-mile radius where pesticide drift happens, right? And so
Right.
you could be 3, 4, 5 miles down the road from me, and I'm not using glyphosate or Roundup. But if you are, eventually with wind and rain, etc., I'm going to be exposed to it. And so the way, I mean, I know you know this, but the Shikamatte pathway in the gut microbiome, the way that Roundup got approved was they said, well, humans don't have a Shikamatte pathway, but it's semantics, right? Our gut microbiome does have one,
Right.
and that controls a lot of our physiology. And so unfortunately, you can pay off, politicians. We all know it happens. There's a doctor, Sandra Palma. I'm not sure where she's located, but she gave a TED talk on BPA, BPB, and for some reason they took it down. I don't know if they received pressure from industry or what, but the point being, a lot of people are under the impression that these three-letter alphabet agencies are these objective third-party scientific agencies, and I'm
Yeah.
here to tell you that's categorically false.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And this is, I've talked to many people directly involved with this stuff and I'm sure as you have, where this is not coming from people that are not the experts. And
Right.
when you understand that the experts know what's going on, and you're talking then directly, you're researching this, I had 15 researchers working for, over 2 years on my book just to sift through the data and to get through all of this stuff, and alarming information when you're willing to dig, but it doesn't come by way of just a flippant Google search. You're even compromised on accessing free information, let alone, we could go down a rabbit hole as to the motivation, and we do know that the motivation is, profit over the people. These systems and these forces are so large and big that I don't see it as crippling. I see it as a problem, but I
Right.
also go, this is why, like, just like you are educating your people, we're having this conversation. I write a book. We have other colleagues. We have to keep talking about this. And really, at the end of the day, it's common sense.
Right.
If you have, um, you know, call it uh, arugula on this hand, and you have arugula on this hand, and you sprayed the arugula with pesticides, herbicides, larvicides, not once, not twice, multiple times,
Right.
because now they're using it as a drying agent as well. So now, if you were to choose this and make a arugula salad, and maybe people don't want to make it for themselves. Maybe, let's say, you're making it for your children. Which one do you think makes the most sense to use? The one that was grown in in natural regenerative soil, cared about all that stuff, or are you gonna trust these white coats that have sprayed and modified genes and and consume that? So the issue is, Doc, is that we don't know that it's there, all of us. We want to, and our human nature is we want to believe, I included, we want to believe that there's no way they would let that grain of that cereal be genetically modified, sprayed with all kinds of stuff, ripping apart essentially our digestive, changing our microflora, changing our mood, changing our elevation of our ability to create dopamine, serotonin, other pathways being thwarted, ripping apart our digestive system, and then thinking that it's just all us. I just have a bad attitude. But if you've been exposed to that for 20 years, like, unbeknownst to you, when you're working hard and just buying cereal for your kid, that's not okay, man. It's
Right.
not okay. And how the hell, you and I have spent career doing this stuff, so we have to sift through all the nonsense. How the hell is, the 350 million or so people in the US and then the billions, how the hell are they supposed to do that? They can't, right? So this is why we need to illuminate this stuff with common sense messaging and go, hey man, filter your water, start there, try to grow food if you can, if you have any, but if you get to know some farmers, if you can, do your best, wash the exposed vegetables and fruits, wash it as best that you can if it's not organic. Hell, wash it even if it is organic, to your point, so there is always ability to change and make better,
Absolutely.
always, right?
Yeah.
And that's the message. I can get going on rants that can feel overwhelming because I live this. It's so do you, right? So it's
Right.
like, how do we inspire? Because at the end of the day, let me just be straight up. Why did I superfood hunt? Why did I even start studying physiology? Well, because I want to live my super life.
Right.
I want to live. I want to have energy. I want to lift heavy things if they're in the way. I want to run up a mountain. I want to jump on a horse. I want to do whatever. I want to live. And I want to live on purpose. I want to live healthy. I want to be connected to friends and family and community. I want life
Yeah.
to be able to express. That is the core of everything I do. It's not I want to be a wellness influencer, for God's
Right.
sakes. It's like that's along the path,
Right.
but that's not the end. The end is I want everybody to not be suffering from this shit. Then I want them to live. So in order for the people that want to choose that, you have to be aware
Yeah.
in order to make another choice. If you're not
Yeah.
aware, you don't know.
Right.
So
And to your point about, sorry to cut you off, but to your point about, not being doom and gloom, a lot of people say, oh, well, I should just go live in a bubble. I'm like, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need to be aware because, we wonder why we have such high rates of cancer and autoimmune and neuroimmune disorders, metabolic disturbances. But the average umbilical cord from a newborn baby has between 250 to 300 carcinogens. And that's just the carcinogens, right? And so this vertical transmission from mother to baby is very real. And even if you look at something like glutathione, our master antioxidant, if it's depleted in mom, the chances of autism go up significantly with the baby. And then we have heavy metals on top of that. And again, it's not to be doom and gloom, and this is not conspiracy. I hear all the time, oh, well, that's conspiracy. I'm like, go to PubMed, type in glyphosate, and there's
Yeah.
nothing positive that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, look at all the data, look at all the research that you can find. Hell, go to ChatGPT, go to Consensus, right? And type whatever you want in. Everything that we're talking about, type it in. Like now, I will say to you, like I don't know all the levels to which they're scraping that information. It's not all the information. Uh, and sometimes conservative messages only get pushed out and they haven't all the data. The levels to which you have to extract real data is astonishing. That alone is its own. Green Info Media, 20 years of gathering data. Sayer over there has dedicated his life to gathering peer-reviewed data on, like, go look up all the benefits of turmeric, for God's sakes, right? And so you want to go back to history of us as species, the plant kingdom, the plant medicine, and I'm not talking psychedelics, I'm talking true plant medicine. If we understood that, if we grew broccoli sprouts and allowed sulforaphane through glycosinolates to exercise themselves of antioxidant power and protein and enzymatic activity, fresh food would change the fabric of our world. So you can do things like that. So you're right. It is not doom and gloom. For whatever reason, we get to be here right now. From I don't know about you, but I want to change what we can. And we got to educate people and then create new systems. Create new systems that we can grow better food. We can create systems to get people who don't have fresh food. We can create cleaner water. We can minimize. I know big entities that are creating today already have alternatives to this very dangerous chemical PFAS out of algae, and it performs just as good, and it's at a price point that is equal. So that's where I like to share those things, because that gives big hope, because people can get overwhelmed when you have some of the biggest companies in the world, by the way, are changing. They're just big, ocean tankers. It takes a while, but I know without a doubt people that are working directly with the biggest companies in the world that have committed to doing a lot better with, for example, regenerative ag. Like that's happening. So I also want to just say this as I'm talking a little lightly about corporations. They're not all bad. You can't say the corporation is bad. They have been under a certain umbrella. Maybe you could make the argument that some corporations are bad, but that aside, the majority of them have great people working within them, discovering things, trying to make things better, right? And so you do have to answer a economic model, like, okay, how do we not tank ourselves as we make a transition? So as I've gotten to realize flippantly, in the TikTok world, we can say this or that, and oftentimes it's not that simple. we have to work together. We have to create solutions together. We have to work with some of these biggest companies in the world. And we've also been proven that sustainable energy technologies are huge economic upsides with less burning of unnecessary fuel and dirty petroleum. And we don't need to make, clothing out of plastic, because it's nylon and rayon and spandex and all of this stuff, endocrine disrupting and bad for the people and bad for the planet. There are solutions. We just need to keep coming together to provide those.
The gym I go to, I mean, I think this is in every gym, but I see, I mean, males and females put their phones in their pockets, and now,
Oh,
like some of the female pants, they have an actual pocket right near the genitals, and I'm like, okay, you're combining these forever chemicals, endocrine disruptors, and now non-native EMFs. That's a bad combination.
it's a big bad combination. And you're right. And then you're trying to biohack your hormones when you go home
Right,
and buying some super supplement. You're
right.
like, what? Yeah, so just to touch on that, I mean, I talked a little bit, and there's a lot of data on the toxicity of clothing. And luckily there's more and more stuff. Uh and like I said, we did a big documentary, and it will be coming out hopefully, in the next 3 to 4 months, called with my buddy Jeff Garner. Uh so we talk a lot about that, but just to touch on the electromagnetic field thing, um, this scared me. Like, I knew about it 25 years ago. I had a researcher start sharing data with me, and I was like, what? Like, of course, I asked the first question, like, what are you talking about? How would they let these um, polarized radiation device? It's on the microwave spectrum, right? So how would they allow this? And we're putting up to our heads, right? And we're carrying these things. How would they? And no one has an answer other than they're not telling us. So just to be clear, just so I say this, the X-rays uh rip DNA apart right away, which is why we use lead, right? We knew it, we found out, we stopped using it in that way. It tears DNA apart at the DNA level. Now we have non-ionizing, which sounds okay, sounds good, right? The data, again, challenge anyone, look it up. Look up electromagnetic fields, look up non-ionizing radiation, uh, look up cell phones, look up that frequency, look up whatever you want. Playing devices, Wi-Fi routers, all of that stuff.
Right.
So we have created non-biological assimilative radiation, right? It's polarizing, meaning it has directive desire. So like, we dial our phone, it goes to a directed thing. It's polarized. Non-polarized radiation is how the sun, right?
Right.
UVA, UVB, and it just distributes that. Obviously, if you hang out in too long, you can get burned, etc. And that's never a good idea. But also, this is a caveat, don't be afraid of the sun. Just
Right.
be aware of where your skin tone is, and don't hurt yourself, burn yourself, but
Right.
get some good exposure.
And the time of
That
day
side,
also, right?
and the time of day. That when the sun's up, great for circadian rhythm, obviously, and then after 10 o'clock, if you're sensitive, it gets a little more intense, and then in the latter part of the day. But so these non-ionizing radiation, the data really comes down in a scary in a few different ways. Number one, throughout the board, many hundreds of data points in this one area and studies around being exposed to a cell phone, to a Wi-Fi, to Bluetooth. It really comes down to time you're exposed. So duration, how long are you exposed, and how proximal it is to you. So how close and how long you're being exposed, that's where the wheels come off. So think about that. So now if you have your phone and it's not off and it's on your body, it's constantly pinging all over the place. It's trying, and the less signal it has, the harder it's working.
Right.
And the more it's it's creating more radiation so that it pulls in the signal. So now that intensity is proximal, it's on you, and it's time. So now data shows that how close that is to the genitalia can aid into inflammation, stress response, so increase free radicals. So it's almost as I'm sitting there like, wow, it's like it's almost a chemical exposure of an endocrine disruptor because it has similar things. So the free radical damage potentially connected to PCOS and women, and the crazy thing, motility in men, fertility, testosterone, contributing to testosterone. There's many reasons that testosterone is going down. It's not the only one, but you start adding it all up, and the testosterone is jumping off the proverbial cliff right now. So,
Yeah.
uh, and and then the thing that freaked me out, Doc, about EMFs is again proximity and duration. When you put your cell phone up to the head, it opens up the blood-brain barrier. And like you said before, back in our day, we used to think moms could do whatever they want because that placental border was solid. Like, the doctors would just say, well, whatever your whatever mom does, the baby's not going to be exposed to it. Well, just like you cited that study that showed that that's absolutely not true, right? And in fact, the opposite. Whatever you're being exposed to, the baby's being exposed to. And it even gets gnarlier with PFAS, but I'll leave that alone. So this electromagnetic field, the thing that freaked me out was proximity and duration. It opens up the blood-brain barrier and allows albumin to pass the blood-brain barrier, which is super important not to get opened, and cause, again, free radical damage, inflammation, and who knows the cascade of effect of, think about that. If you're talking on your phone multiple hours a day up to your head, you're opening up your body endogenously to have molecules go into your brain that aren't supposed to be there. So that creates a whole cascade of problems. The problem with all of this stuff and the loopholes is they can't say one thing's a smoking gun because it's harmed by 1,000 cuts. The more you're on your phone all day, the more you're using it, the more damage. But then that damage adds up. Next thing you know, why do I have a tumor? Because these things are very real. The tumor effect, the RNA signaling gets messed up, right? So DNA is sending out all the time RNA signaling of conducting where the proteins need to go, how they arrange themselves. But now you've got an electric field that is non-harmonizing for the body, screwing up the very fabric of our electrical communication within the structuring of our body, right? So it gets really strange really fast. And I will just say, when you dig enough, the telecommunication companies have exactly the same playbook as the tobacco industry had. Tobacco, if you all thinking and rolling your eyes right now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look back and see what for 40 plus years the tobacco industry knew. And they were kicking that can down the road, using all of the jargon to get away with that their product was carcinogenic and it was harmful. Now, I will also say 3M, DuPont that created PFAS, they knew that as far back as the 50s and 60s, and all of that shit is out now too. So if you are sitting here saying the telecommunication company is not out for profit and doesn't give a shit because they haven't done any safety data, the safety data that they did do through the EPA, they squashed and they didn't tell the public. This is the data that, pun intended, that should be out in the world, but we're all running around. I get it. These things are convenient as hell. We've got a massive computer in our hands, but
Mhm.
let me just leave people with this. How you use it is everything. Okay? Don't put it up to your head. And when it's on, don't put it in your pocket, right? If you have to have it on, just hold it, right? And keep it away from your head and your organs and your heart and your like, and if you hadn't noticed anyone here, you can see a air tube. Both of us are plugged back in. That is the best. Plug back in. Don't use Bluetooth. Bluetooth is less of intensity of signal, so the amperage of the signal is less, but it's still the same frequency as a cell phone. And it's again proximal and duration. So now it's in your freaking head and it's just sitting there for hours and hours and hours. That shit is harmful. I don't care what any vague data and people throw it. The data is sprinting at us to go, this is not good. So you and we plug back in. I took it another step where I got the air tubes. So it doesn't even allow any sort of fragment electromagnetic field to even come to my ear because there's air passing through. So I
What brand is
hear
that?
this is Defender.
Defender. Okay. Yeah, I know
So
that.
Defender Shield, and then there's another great company, August Bryce over at Tech Wellness. They have a bunch of little stuff. Plus, so takeaway is plug back in. I plug in. If I'm on a call and I don't have people around, I'm on a speaker and not holding my phone. If I do have to take a call, I'm plugged in. At night, everyone, turn off your Wi-Fi routers. If you really want to go and turn and not live in Wi-Fi and you have the ability to do that, you can actually plug all devices back in. August has instructions and abilities to do that. Um, and those are some just non-negotiables with these devices that you minimize. Don't keep it on your body. Don't put it up to your head. Plug back in, turn your Wi-Fi router, and please, 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 with children, these signals pass through their brains infinitely more. In some cases, all the way through the brain if the phone is here. And if they are using laptops or smart screens or whatever, download whatever you need first, and then shut the signaling off to the screen, and then they can put it on their laps, and that's infinitely better.
Yeah.
And if without saying, don't put laptops on your lap. like
Right.
like put space, right?
Yeah.
So get a stand. I have a stand and I also have a shield underneath. So there's about 17% of the population that is electrosensitive
Mhm.
that can't live in this world. It is debilitating them, so they need to take extra precautions. And there's many, so don't fall for every device. There's some good data, some good devices that are helping to minimize. Another one's quite pricey, but it's a company called WaveGuard out of Germany, an electrosensitive engineer that developed this. So that creates a natural field to help dissipate some of the polarized radiation. So anyway, those are some solutions. I didn't want to leave people without a little bit of
Oh,
knowledge as to what to do.
yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's like the five phenomenon in psychology. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So if we look at, okay, EMFs, non-native EMFs, plus heavy metals, right? Not a lot of people say, oh, well, I haven't broken a mercury thermometer. I've never tested a single person who didn't have at least two heavy metals that were elevated. And sometimes it's not even provoked. That's just, non-provoked. So provoked would be 50, 60% more usually. But when you increase non-native EMFs along with heavy metals, that causes calcium efflux to flood the cell. You get an increase in peroxynitrite, damages the cell membrane. And to your point about kids, the blood-brain barrier is not fully formed until around 4.5 years of age. So if you have a 2-year-old who's on a tablet all day and plug into Wi-Fi, that's going to harm them,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're not even seeing the full effect of all of this stuff because you and I were in a world, there's people now obviously being born in a world that never that we're still in that generation where we know a majority of our life that didn't have this shit, right?
Right.
And so in a last almost in a last stance, like, hey man, like I'm just not flippantly saying it's all okay. I'm using it, but I'm using it really wisely,
Right.
right? We're not going back to dial phones, but we do need to use some common sense,
Yeah.
and that's where, again, the agency that I want people to take away is when you can do something about it. When you
Right.
don't know, there's a bunch of people that I just don't want to know. I just want to live my life. Cool. Then you can turn off this podcast. You probably don't want to listen to my podcast or your podcast because we're constantly looking to ways to optimize life. Because ultimately, by the way, it's not to overly obsess about this stuff.
Right.
It's to take an action so that you liberate agency. And what you do with that liberation of agency is, okay, how about having more energy? How about driving yourself with that energy, with that focus into a purpose? How about creating a legacy of the impact that you want to have in the world? And that could be in your community. It could be a better dad, a better mother. It could be whatever that is. It doesn't have to be, I need to, figure out a rocket to Mars. It's just whatever you want to do, to live a better, more fulfilling life. If you have more energy, if you have more health, if that wasn't an issue, what would you want your life to be?
Right.
These are the questions I ask every day. It's not to be obsessed over this stuff and
Exactly.
try to be the best biohacker. What's the point of it? The point is to get clear about the point. The point is, well, through all of that, what do you want to do? Who do you want to
Right.
be? How do you want to live? That's the community I want to create. I
Yeah.
want
Absolutely.
to help each other because life throws shit. We're gonna get sick. We're gonna get hit. Of course. I'm not saying by eliminating you're gonna be perfect. This is perfectly imperfect. All this stuff, and we're just here for a tiny little blip. But as I'm here, as you're here, I wanna. This is just me, but I want to swing for the fences. I want to do as much as I can.
Yeah.
Because that for me, that's fulfilling. That's fulfilling. And like I I got exposed to a lot of in a good way, I got exposed to a lot of things, a lot of information, a lot of great people. Well, is it just for me to regurgitate? Is it just for me to just sit with that information? For me, it isn't. For me, it's to share it and to educate. And for the people that want more and want more of their life and want to see what's on the other side of just a chemistry set of a body that's kind of, sickly, I want to help people to get to that other place. And I know you do too. So we just
Absolutely.
do it in our way. And, and that's the motivation of all of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I gave a talk about a little over 2 months ago to a group of real estate investors, all high net worth individuals, and they were already kind of open to integrative health. But they said, "How do you find time to do this?" And when I hit them with the EMF stuff, they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, how are we supposed to work?" And I said, "Okay, well, I don't expect you to care about this as much as I do, but hopefully you care about something like your family, your business, your mental health, etc. And so you got to have energy to do whatever it is you want to do in life. You got to have clarity of mind, clarity of thought.
Mm.
You got to have strength. You've got to have endurance. And so I don't expect you to spend 4 hours a day biohacking. You don't need to. I mean, you can spend 30 minutes breathing some molecular hydrogen like I do, 30 minutes of red light therapy, morning sunlight, and then an hour of exercise. And you're good. I mean, the average American watches a little over 4 hours a day of TV. So don't tell me you don't have time.
Right. Exactly. It's priorities and perspective, right?
Yeah,
And just those things of like how you set it up. It's like, well, like that's perspective shift.
right.
What do you want? You want to be a better dad? You want to have more strength? You want to have more resiliency? You want to like that's the real reasons. And I think we get caught, especially here in the States, we get caught in like needing to produce just to produce, needing to make that extra money. Like we've bought into a particular slavery lie that
Hmm.
we are just working for money
Right,
and and breaking all of that apart. Not
no,
that receiving money is bad, because it's not, but
right.
it's like looking at abundance in a different way. And to your point, well, what is this all about? The reorientation of the information is the most important thing, or it just becomes, like they said, a bunch of tasks that don't line up to the values,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think, we're moving more and more towards, understanding this stuff. I mean, I went into a pharmacy recently, and one brand that I've used since, like, 2005 is New Chapter,
Hmm.
and, now they're in CVS, and I'm like, if you would have told me that 20 years ago, I would say, "Yeah, right."
Right.
But now, like, some people are kinda preying on the terminology and the zeitgeist, and, like, I saw a commercial for Colgate, it says detoxifying toothpaste, and it has fluoride in it. And I'm like, "Okay, you're just misleading people, that's just a blatant lie." And I
Yeah.
mean, the main study on, fluoride came out of Harvard showing that it lowers IQ, and, I interviewed a biological dentist, Dr. De Andrade, and she said there's no study that's not funded by one of the companies that makes toothpaste that shows, fluoride is any more beneficial than using, like, hydroxyapatite or another mineral base, for your teeth and gums.
Right. Yeah, you pull the string on fluoride, you going, how did they pull that off?
Yeah,
How did they pull off the the waste product of the aluminum industry, the waste product of the pesticide and herbicide industry? How did they pull off a waste stream to put into the water of the Americans? The fact that they pulled that off in in front facing, we all know it's there, and it's like that's where I'm like, this shit is Twilight Zone stuff.
right,
Like, we've just agreed that, you know, it's a beautiful thing that our government decided to put fluoride in water to save our teeth.
right,
Like, if that was the case, to your point, we'd be giving away glutathione. We'd be
right,
literally providing food for every American, fresh food in their communities. We have 47 million acres of lawn that we water for no reason other than to border a house. We could be food sovereign in a matter of 3 years, right? Like, if the government and we're buying that story, come
right.
on, people, let's go. Like, this is
I
so
know, right? I mean, and that's the thing, we have people, I won't mention any names, but who are buying up farmland,
yeah,
and it's not for philanthropic purposes, I can assure you.
yeah.
Um, but you mentioned farmers, the importance of farmers. I heard a story about 2 weeks ago. I was on an Instagram reel. This couple in Missouri, they have kind of a small farm, and they don't do any herbicides or pesticides. And if I remember correctly, they do third-party testing for things like glyphosate, et cetera. Well, one of the government inspector agencies shows up and finds them and basically closes them down because they are selling to local members of their community, $20, $30 here for some vegetables. And they said, well, it's not going through a facility. And he's like, well, that's the whole point. It's not going through a facility.
Right. Yeah,
What can people do to advocate for themselves?
there's well, you know, we we have to keep doing that. It was the start of our country. It was the sovereign start of our country. Uh, the you know the our country was built on farmers, right? So, Lincoln was trying to do a good job, and he created the Homestead Act, which was actually trying to make homestead protected. But what unfortunately happened was corporations started uh, becoming or identifying as people, and then started buying up all this land, and then of course distillation of alcohol was the fuel of our country. So the waste streams of agriculture were used as fuel, um in for everybody. That was what farmers did, right? So they learned how to distill. We could actually, again, we could do this right now.
Yeah.
We're 40 to 50% of our food is wasted, most of it as some sort of carbohydrate. You could distill it. Great work by a good friend of mine, David Bloom, wrote a distillation book in the 70s, went to Congress. Like, we can create also fuel, clean fuel sovereignty, like now, like with waste streams, and also just start, instead of monopolies, we start breaking this apart, and then our communities take the waste streams and do it ourselves. So these, again, this is overreach, over control, all of this stuff. Again, it's profit centered.
Right.
The only reason they shut them down was not of this concern that they're gonna have dirt on their beets. It's because they need to go through a chain of commoditization that has a lot of people picking at the profits, and pasteurization, kill steps. I understand in certain instances, from a wide variety, you need to do that so you don't kill people. But when you're decentralized and your farmer, and to shut those things down is just absolutely criminal. This is, again, this is none of your business, government. This is
Right.
none of your business. Like,
Exactly.
in Denmark, they have these farmhouses. They're not farmhouses. There's a particular name. They have these little, almost like next to the mailbox, these little,
Mhm.
I don't know, boxes, food boxes. And they put out their fresh produce, and you can just come through, and it's an honesty policy. And so you put in, we suggest this amount, and you put in what you can, and you take your food and you go on your way. Like, this is today, right? This is the working models of this today. And
Yeah.
so yeah, man, there's again, these things are, they're ridiculous in
Yeah.
nature, some of these things. And because of the overreach of corporations, and how politics and corporations and money are all tied together, we have the numbers,
Yeah.
and we keep doing the right thing. And eventually we push back. There are things that it does work, right? It
Yeah.
does work. When Minnesota, which is the headquarters of 3M is shutting down. They've outlawed some really bad PFAS already, and now they're outlawing the rest of them. And Minnesota will not let any products come into or out of the state,
Good for them.
with PFAS in it. So, you know, and they were ground zero for
Yeah.
the creation of it for a long time. So, anyway, there's a lot of tentacles to this stuff, um, but again, we just need to kind of become aware so that we can, and I say, everyone here, grow food, share food with your neighbors, and if the cops come, let them come. It's
Yeah.
unconstitutional, and we'll create GoFundMe's to come after these idiots, and we'll create this change because it has to. It's time.
Absolutely. You're doing great work. Thank you so much. 2 books, Fatal Conveniences and SuperLife. Where we're going to put up the links, but where can people find you?
Yeah, so DarinOlien.com. I'm moving into a new brand. I'm calling everything SuperLife soon, but that's in the next few months. But Darin Olien on all social. I have a marketplace with a bunch of vetted companies that I've found. So they've guaranteed to me that there's discounts for those products. So we're trying to get some more safe awareness out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Keep up the great work and thank you for your time.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.